Everyone, my name's Laura. My name's okay. My name's Laura Kotten. I work with Edina Realty as a real estate agent, and I own my own window restoration business, which was something that really started for me when I purchased my old home and needed some window repair, and I was curious, and I've always been a hands-on person. And then it kind of grew as COVID was hitting and people needed different projects going on, and so that's sort of it ended up being just something that was kind of a creative outlet for me. So I'm feeling very lucky to be able to blend both of my worlds today. So thank you, Natalie, for having me on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Leppink. I use she, her pronouns. And yeah, thank you for having me be a part of this today. My background started actually when I did an AmeriCorps program with Northern Bedrock Historic Preservation Corps. I'm currently on the board of that organization. So I'm very passionate about, getting people into the trades, kind of wherever they are in the process. But that was way back in 2017, kind of an interim there. I ended up actually going out to Point Reyes National Seashore and working with their historic preservation crew there, working on wood window restoration, primarily on the historic buildings. Then I kind of, made a trek over to Grand Teton and worked with the Western Center for Historic Preservation for a period of time. Also a lot on window restoration, but also just on log restoration and different things like that. After that, I did come back to Minnesota, and I got a master's in heritage studies and public history. So I kind of went more into academia, but kind of on the side, what I've remained doing is just doing small window restoration projects. And yeah, so nothing, I don't have an official business or anything. It's kind of more been on the side doing different projects for people that I know. But yeah, now I work mostly at the intersection of disability justice and historic preservation. So anyways, I have a plethora of things that I like to keep myself busy, but yeah, I'll just leave it off at that. Thank you all for having me today. I think this would be a good time for me to work on the sharing option. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. Is that showing up for everyone? Wonderful.
Yep, I can see it.
Well, lovely. So as you all know, you're here to learn about wood windows in old homes. And so the title of our presentation is Wood Windows in Old Homes, Repair or Replace. You do want to do a brief land acknowledgements. I'll pass that over to Natalie.
Thanks, Laura. As an organization committed to connecting people to place, Rethos recognizes that we work within the historical, ancestral, and contemporary homeland of the Dakota people. We acknowledge the history of violence and erasure of Indigenous people, and we acknowledge that Indigenous people are still here in Minnesota. Rethos is committed to understanding the layers of history that have shaped our environment, that have created our communities, and that built our houses. We invite you to consider the histories upon which your home sits. I'll throw this link in the chat if you're interested in exploring this further. Thank you.
We did a little bit of introduction for ourselves, but what I always like to do at the beginnings of these classes is to understand a little bit more about what is interesting to you all to learn today. So you can either toss it in the chat if there's a particular topic that you're really interested in. Otherwise, you can unmute and just share a little bit about what you'd like to learn more about today.
I guess I'll talk. I've been really excited to learn more about windows because as a realtor working in old homes, a lot of times I think you see windows that are replaced with just like vinyl sliders that don't really fit the aesthetic of old homes. And I would love to give a better option to clients on how they could repair their own windows and save what's there already.
Definitely. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mariah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm a big fan of Rethos, taken a bunch of classes. I know a decent amount of about old windows now because of Rethos exclusively, honestly. And I love it. Like, I think it's the coolest thing to be able to go into houses and be like, don't pull out these windows. So always furthering my education on old windows because I think they get such a bad rap and they need to be saved.
Definitely.
I'm also a
agree.
realtor, I should say that. So informing my clients is a huge deal to me. So anywho, thanks guys.
Yeah, thank you. I see a comment in the chat from Mike that says, interested in learning how to decide if windows are candidates for repair. We will address that today, so glad to hear someone's really interested. Does anybody else have anything they want to share before we get started?
As a realtor, I also agree. I'm all about preserving the historic windows and making them as efficient as possible, and also keeping them out of the landfill. And I was really touched by the quote that you opened with about the indigenous people.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for sharing that at the beginning. It's definitely so important to have, those acknowledgements in these types of presentations, especially when we're talking so much about land. Okay, so I think with that, we are going to delve a little bit more into the presentation. Laura, I don't know if you or I wanted to share a little bit about this.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the only reason I include this on a slide is mostly because when I end up clicking around on replacement windows or searching about wood windows, I get marketed a lot for replacement windows afterwards. And so then I start getting a lot of articles like this. So this one is from, September 2020. However, I think it got marketed to me a few months ago. And for the really tiny font reads, there's a lot to know when replacing windows on a historic building. Find out about regulation, who enforces them, and what the National Park Service has to do about it. And it's really tips for replacing historic windows. And so there's a lot going on in this, but it's by Marvin Windows. And, throughout this article, it really reinforces a lot of misconceptions people have about windows, both with lack of efficiency, but also, how historic windows can be seen as inferior in general to replacement windows. And I also think it's very fascinating to take a look at this building they use as a reference. And you can kind of take a look at the ways in which they've used replacement windows on some of these, I think most of the windows that they have in the building. So I just like to share that because it does, these articles really float around, and a lot of misinformation is actually spread through these articles and makes it seem like from a very reputable source, but it's really good, I think, in some ways to acknowledge who's writing these types of articles and who they're kind of messaging and targeting with that. I'll pass it over to Laura K.
Yes, hello, thanks, Laura. So our goal today really is to give education to you so you can give it to your clients, pass it along. We know that you're busy realtors, we're all busy and it's a crazy time, of course, but we want to, kind of set you up so that you have enough information as you're cruising through different 15-minute showings or 20-minute showings, because we know how things are right now, that you can be able to guide your clients and give them an initial assessment of a potential seller's home and the quality of the windows and what may need to be repaired or not repaired, and sort of a timeline. We also want to be able to enable you to be able to speak to the condition of the window and what needs to be repaired, and reassure the client that it can be preserved. There's, I don't know, 5 or 10% of windows that maybe can't be repaired, but even so will take a little extra work, and it can. So often the information, like Laura was saying, that you are receiving or that buyers are receiving are really marketed from the window replacement companies. So a lot of times buyers, particularly first-time home buyers, will only hear what they've been told so much. So we want to be able to equip you to educate your clients. And then hopefully you take away some resources and details from the class today. For those of you that want to get a little bit more hands-on, there's a lot of information that we're going to be providing near the end of the class. And one of the things that I also wanted to call out too is that we talk about historic homes and windows, and we show a lot of these beautiful homes. But, you know, in reality, the first-time home buyer level homes are often the ones that need some window love. So the gamut of window repair is all across the board. It's not just the big mansions. Next slide. Trying to keep, I'm doing split screens here. All right, so one of the most beneficial aspects of being an agent is being able to understand and connect with your clients, developing a relationship potentially beyond just a sale, because you know that that's how our world is. We need to develop relationships and continue those relationships. We want to be looked at experts in our field, and these are just a few ways to kind of connect with your clients. So particularly for first-time home buyers, try and find out if they're looking for an older home. What speaks to them? What do they want in an old home? Sometimes, you know, if they've always known that newest is best, they might see windows as a deal breaker, knowing that they've got a dozen, 20, 30 windows that maybe need some love. They may not want to look at homes that need the window repair. So if you can show them these homes and let them know that, you know, these couple of aspects are manageable, you're gonna be the expert, and they're gonna trust you for sure. You are the first line of information awareness. Another way to connect with them is finding out if they're handy or if they're skilled of some sort, or even just an interest. Maybe they're trying to figure out what they want to be able to do in their new home, and they've never really had the opportunity. So asking them about what their interests are in old homes, what they maybe want to do, what they think they see themselves doing, and being able to direct them to a path to understand more about their maintenance. Rethos in particular has a lot of classes about old homes. I know the Minnesota Tool Library, and then there's a lot of other areas around that can help your clients learn about their old home and get their hands dirty a little bit. And they may find out it's a very rewarding topic that they like to do, is being able to restore. With your buyers, you are learning what type of house they are interested in, whether it's a, you know, mid-century modern or a Victorian or whatever it is. That will help you, obviously, being able to focus in on certain neighborhoods or search criteria in the MLS. It's much easier for sure. If you have any sellers and they're contemplating selling in the next 6 months or so, as you are going through the walkthrough with them and trying to assess what needs to be repaired, what needs to be fixed, what can be tabled, and trying to figure out what the cost is for that before actually, you know, investing a whole lot of money in trying to repair something that maybe doesn't need to be repaired. You can, again, kind of educate them on, here are the couple of things that can be done. And, oh, thanks, Laura. Here are the couple of things that can be done. And it's actually not going to cost as much money as you think, and can probably be done faster than replacing the windows themselves. You've probably also seen a lot of our younger buyers coming up are much more environmentally conscious about many things in their life. And this is an area where you can speak to them about the quality of windows, which I know Laura's going to get into a little bit later too, but the old wood windows, the 100-plus-year-old windows, they're made of natural materials with glazing putty that is from boiled linseed oil that comes from a flax plant, cotton sash cords, iron weights, and a really dense hardwood. So dense that we don't even have that in existence anymore. So all of these materials are the greenest options, and to save them is financially, I mean, in my opinion, the best route to go. The other option, of course, is the vinyl windows with the PVC, and it's a chemically manufactured item. And we all know how sometimes the quality isn't stick as well as it should. But saving and taking care of what you have really is the most cost-effective route when being financially conscious. So again, just kind of understanding where your clients are. Oh, sorry, Laura, I'm on the understand financial abilities. There we go. So another part really is understanding the financial aspect that your clients have. And with the market being what it is, and buyers are throwing tens of thousands over the asking price, everybody reaches a limit of some sort, right? So being able to talk to them about how much can they really afford? If they're selling, how much do you want to walk away in profit? These are all factors as you are trying to figure out what the balance is on restoration or replacement. And restoration, in my opinion, is going to be a more manageable and, again, financially favorable option. So it's possible that sellers might not be able to afford new windows, or buyers might not be able to afford new windows. And if you can walk through the house and show them the different aspects, windows, you may not know this, but they can be done a few at a time. You could do the front facing windows, the street facing windows. You can just do the ones that need sash cord repair, but you could break it down into pieces that, again, are much more manageable versus having to replace everything all at once. I'm sure you've all had your own projects at home. Like, once you get started, the ball just kind of keeps rolling, and it just adds up. And so restoring windows does keep it more contained, I would say. It also helps to keep them consistent with a neighborhood, particularly if you are looking at a house that has predominantly older homes and predominantly original windows. It just keeps that consistency and the cohesive within the neighborhood. As I mentioned before, a lot of first-time home buyers think that newest is best because that's so much where the marketing has come in over the years. And then a lot of times realtors that maybe don't know or aren't comfortable with old wood windows and how they work and that they can be repaired will just say, you know what, we need new windows. You need to get new windows. This is what the buyers will want. Well, potentially, but it could be that the future buyers maybe want the old wood windows. They want the original window. They want the authenticity. So I would dive deep with your sellers before they make a big investment on replacing windows. Find out if it's really needed or not. Sorry, I need a little water here. So you also want to address any assumptions. This is where you, as the informed realtor, can guide your clients on options. And just because a component of the house is worn, it doesn't need to be replaced. And this is a big aspect that I try and talk about with my clients, and pointing out, it just needs some repair. It needs some love. It needs some attention. It doesn't necessarily need to be replaced. A good comparison, I would say, is, when you have a blacktop driveway, for example, and it's a couple of years old, it has some cracks and it's faded, but you can just have somebody seal the cracks and put some new seal coating on it, and it's going to last a lot longer and it's going to look fresh and new. The same approach can be done with wood windows. They are designed to be maintained. They were very intentionally designed 100 years ago. They were very smart with how houses were assembled way back then. And then you also want to know your resources. As realtors, my initial approach is we can't be the yellow pages, but that's kind of dating myself. But so we can't be the Google and have contacts for every area of a home. We have to know enough to be dangerous and enough to be able to refer our clients to other areas, other resources that can help them learn more about the information that they need. And that's part of the reason you're here, is that you are arming yourself with how to look for potential issues, how they can be repaired, and walk away with more resources. So at the end of the class, we do have a giant list of resources for all of you. Next one. All right, so this slide, I wanted to talk just a little bit of compare and contrast. So on the left side, sorry, on the left side, you can see a house that has replacement vinyl windows. It's fairly clear because they are white. The trim around it is kind of a cream. Maybe you've seen it around the neighborhoods with, a brown or a red or something like that, but it's very obvious that these windows have been replaced. You don't see the lack of individual glass panes. You don't see necessarily a cohesiveness between the trim and the window itself. And it just kind of sticks out. The aesthetic, I mean, to me personally, and I believe that's probably why you guys are all on the call here, the aesthetic just isn't the same. It looks like something was ripped out. And I don't want to get emotional, but I mean, to have windows ripped out is kind of painful. So as a comparison on the right, we have some original windows. The lower right-hand side are a giant bank of windows, and you could see the glass in there has this unique reflectiveness to them. There's wavy glass there that sort of offsets a beautiful sunset, or as you're walking by, it sort of waves at you a little bit. And the upper part are aluminum storm windows. They're not fantastic, but you could still see behind the aluminum storms that the original windows are there. The original panes are there. And all of this makes the house look right. It looks cohesive. It just fits. It just fits. And I think that's a really important component to be able to talk to your clients and say, you're buying an old home and you want to sort of fit in with the neighborhood in a way. You want to fit in with what this house is and listen to what it's speaking to you. The next one. All right. This is another kind of compare and contrast. I was in Boston fairly recently in the Beacon Hill neighborhood, and I ran across, they have the huge row of these beautiful brick homes, and a couple things stuck out at me. This home in A, you can see the windows, and I'm using my mouse and you can't see me doing this. The windows at the top in A, you could tell they've been replaced, right? I mean, they just look almost out of place. It's a much bigger window that would normally be there. And the number of panes from top to bottom are very different than if you look at the floor below. You see how it's what, 8 over 8. I mean, the congruency looks off. Whereas you compare it to B, and you have essentially the same opening width, but it has the same windows as the floor below, and then again the floor below. So there's consistency from top to bottom, and it just makes it look like a complete old house. It's part of the overall aesthetics of the home. All right, and then the next one, Laura. Sorry, I should stop. Are there any questions here that we should talk to?
I have one question.
Sure.
I live in a house that's probably like 1924, and the storms have been replaced with the aluminum combinations. And I'm wondering if there are any options to make those look better, or if there's a better option for replacement at some point.
Yes, there is. We have a ton of resources at the bottom and or at the end of the class, and it can range anywhere from newer aluminum windows to having authentic wood windows made. So we have actual contacts for you. So you'll walk away from that. Anything else?
Caroline asked a question in the chat about how to prioritize window repair throughout a house, especially when thinking about lead abatement. Curious, for example, if it's better to like repair windows in a bedroom first. I said we're getting into lead safety a little bit later in the presentation, so we can put a pin in that question, but I just wanted to put it out there to get you thinking about it too.
Got it. Okay. Should we table that one for the end?
Sure.
Okay. All right. All right. We'll get to that. Okay. All right. A couple more examples here because I think it's beneficial. I mean, we could talk all we want about here's what you need to do and here's what you look for, but the images help. So on the left is a sash that needs repair. You could see in the upper corners, and the sash is actually upside down, but in the upper corners of the sash, the paint is coming off. That's often where the sun or the rain is hitting it the most. And then throughout the individual panes, you could see chunks of the glazing that's missing. And that's basically what happens normally. And you can also see where there's sort of a discoloration of this. It's like a sage green color. It looks a little bit more blue. Really, the purpose here is to help you understand what normal wear and tear looks like, what it can become, and then what it can ultimately end up looking like. The exposed wood, so in the sash that has the glazing that's coming off, you could see some of the exposed wood up in the corner. And then, yes, thank you, Laura. Also on the muntins where the glazing has come off. It's not the end of the world. However, if it is exposed, if that bare wood is exposed to whether direct water or condensation moisture over an extended period of time, it's going to start to rot the wood, or it'll make it kind of expand a little bit. That makes everything sort of shift even more so. It just becomes more cumbersome. So it's important when a sash gets to this stage of life that you want to think about, having some repairs done within the next year, 2 years. It's not super urgent, but it needs to be added to a priority list of somehow. So the glazing is not something that is on new windows. The glazing is specific to old homes and wood windows. The glazing it's different than the glazing you'd pick up at the hardware store. It's not like caulk. It's not that type of sticky stuff, but it's kind of more of a putty or a softer clay if you've never felt it. But the purpose of glazing on windows like this is it helps hold the glass in place. Granted, there's like little triangles that hold the glass in place, but the glazing putty also helps. It's also acting as an insulator. So it reduces some of the sound coming in from outside. And even though you have storm windows, it helps reduce some of the sound and any type of temperature changes, whether it's hot or cold. So that's part of the purpose of glazing. It's applied at kind of an angular level. So if you didn't have storms and there's rain hitting the glass, the purpose of the glazing is to shed the water and move it away from the house, move it away from the window so it's not sitting. So there's a lot of functional aspects of that too. So in that aspect, if water is hitting a sash where the glazing has broken off, you could see why the water would sit there and sort of deteriorate. So the solution is to remove the glazing and apply new glazing, remove the paint. We'll talk about lead paint a little bit later, and new glazing, new paint, priming and paint, of course, and it's good truly for another 50 years. If you have a quality job, quality materials, it will last. Onto the sash cords. So you've probably seen this when you've walked around in older houses where the cord here is sticking out of the pulley, or it doesn't exist, or you try and open the window and you have to like shimmy it up a little bit. It's most likely because of the cord or the lack of a cord. The cords themselves are connected to oblong weights on either side of the sash, and you can't see them. There's actually a pocket that you have to unscrew and dig into to get to them. But the weights are there to create a balancing system that helps the window move up and down evenly. So if one weight is broken, the other weight is having to compensate for the entire sash, and that's why it doesn't open evenly. A lot of times a sash cord will look like the image on the left because, well, in this particular example, the cord got caught in the wheel of the pulley and they couldn't figure out how to get it out, but they needed to open the window, so you cut the cord. Sometimes the cord lets loose from the side of the window. Sometimes the cord unties itself from the weight. So either way, it's basically taking apart part of the window, putting a new cord in, putting it back together. It all needs to be done. This is also a component too, as you are looking through, I would say probably more from the selling angle, as you're trying to assess putting the house on the market. This is something that will likely be called out in an inspection, whether it's after the buyer or even prior. So finding somebody that can do sash cord repair and just sort of crank through 5 or 6 windows or whatever is needed is a reassuring thing to have done before you put a house on the market. All right. Okay. Can they be repaired? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. The sash on the bottom here, or on the left, I'm sorry. It looks kind of faded white, probably. There's peeling paint. It's very aged. At the top of it is weather stripping that has drips of paint that are coming down, and all of it still works. But the weather stripping at the top is meant to be kind of an interlocking like this. So when there is layers of paint, it obstructs the interlocking mechanism of the sash. So what's done? Remove the paint, put in new glazing, and get some new weather stripping, or strip the weather stripping if you want to, but it's kind of a pain. And then ultimately it's going to look like the fully restored bottom sash on the right. It looks brand new, and it's it could totally be done. I'm laughing because I've run across quite a few people that are like, it looks like new. Did you get a new window? No. This is what taking care of your home and taking care of what your product looks like. It can be done, believe it or not. All right, the next one, Laura, thank you for driving. So wood windows were made with the intention of being easily repairable. As you've gone through older homes, you've seen a lot of areas within the home that it made logical sense. They were always designing with a very good use of space, and nooks and crannies and everything like that. They were very smart about everything that they had when they were designing back then. One of the things a little tip about old wood windows, oftentimes a bottom sash, so a window component, when you look at a total window, sorry, I wish you could see my hands more. We often refer to a window as both pieces, the moving part, and a sash is the part that moves up and down, and there's a top and a bottom sash. So oftentimes the bottom sash is just one pane of glass, and it maybe seems inconsistent, but there's kind of some reason for it. The bottom sash is the one that's opened and closed most often. It's moving most often. And the bottom sash is also at furniture height. It's at little kid height, meaning there's a good possibility of it being broken. And so when that happens, obviously it needs to be replaced. The window needs to be taken apart to be able to take that sash out. The bottom sash is the first thing that comes out, so it's easier to do. And there's also less corners to be glazing and priming and painting. So less corners is less precision time, which is less dollars. So there's, again, very intentional design for older homes like that. Many of the components within homes were made to repair the individual parts. So as part of an entire window, again, if it's just the sash cords that need to be repaired, just that can be done. The entire thing doesn't need to be replaced. The message that you want to be able to deliver to your clients is that it can be repaired. It truly can be. Even if it's just 1 or 2, it's much more manageable than replacing 12 or 15. I know I've already said this, but we just have to drive the message home. So not only the quantity, but also the time frame. If you are, again, looking to list a home in a couple of months, it's going to be a lot easier to fix a couple of things versus get on somebody's schedule and replace an entire bank of windows. Let's see, next slide here. Okay. So you can see a couple of windows here. The ability to maintain the amount of visual space and natural light coming through the windows when you keep the original wood windows it's a component that a lot of people don't realize until it's gone. And because the new windows sound great and it meets all these features that I was sold, and then the new windows are in place and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I don't have as much natural light coming in, and there's where regret sets in. So this is something to be able to tell your clients that the windows that are in place are allowing the maximum amount of natural light coming in, which who doesn't want to see outside? It's beautiful. And oftentimes, like you can see in the picture on the right here, if windows have been maintained, they will have wavy glass. And it looks like a distorted picture. I don't know if, as you've been going through homes, if you've seen what wavy glass looks like, but this is a great picture, Laura. Thank you so much for putting this in, because I've always had a hard time trying to capture it. But the way I would describe as you're walking through a house and you might see wavy glass is if you stand in front of the window and you just sway on your feet left to right, don't take steps, just sort of sway, and you can see the image on the other side looking like this image on the right. It looks a little distorted, and that's original glass. And that original glass is a huge characteristic of older homes, and it's becoming more rare because not only, as people replace windows, but, glass breaks, sometimes it has to be replaced and everything like that. So having this rare item is valuable to a lot of buyers that are looking to be in an authentic older home. All right. And then repair. I was going to talk about this, Laura, but I don't know if you want to lead into it or not.
I'm good with either way. Do you want me to pop in for a second?
Sure. I'm going to take a little break
sure.
in my voice here.
Oh, no, totally. And to also follow up on what Laura was saying about the wavy glass is that, it is a little more difficult to get wavy glass. It can be more expensive. You can salvage this along with other materials to repair your windows. But there are, I think, potentially a couple of companies now that specifically create wavy glass. And well, you can actually choose different time periods or places. Depending on where you are, you actually can have different styles of wavy glass or just different characteristics, which is just, I guess, more information. My other favorite part of this is that often we'll talk to people who will say, that's just what happens to glass after a long period of time because it's a liquid, it'll slowly shift downwards. But that's actually kind of a misconception. It is because during the process of creating the glass, a lot of it was poured. And so the waves actually come from that pouring process itself, the manufacturing process. So anyways, that was, I definitely had that misconception up until the point my boss had to inform me otherwise when I first started working on wood windows. So anyways, a little extra. I think glass is such an integral part of these projects. Anyways, so versatile repair options. So one thing I'd like to talk to people about is that there's a range of things that you can consider when doing wood window repair. I think one great thing that Laura noted is that you can just do sash cord repair. You don't have to restore the rest of the window or do these kind of these greater restoration options. And so you can kind of see on this left-hand photo here, I'm just tilting the lower sash out so that I can access this cord. And it really depends on your windows, depending on where your sash pocket weight pockets, there we go, are. You may have to take the upper sash out, you might not, but you can completely just do sash cord repair without doing anything else. If you're really concerned about the weather efficiency, the energy efficiency, and otherwise, you can also just look at doing different weather stripping options. And these can be more integrated with bronze weather stripping, which you can see here. Or you could do more simple solutions like putting plastic over your windows, other options. I think we'll come back to this. And also, as Laura noted, the easiest part to get out of is the bottom sash. And often you may have noticed this in your walkthroughs is that the upper sash might be fixed in place because it's painted shut. This could be for both the upper sash and the bottom sash, but more often than not, the upper sash is what's stationary and the bottom one is left mobile so you can still utilize that window. And I mean, the key thing to note about double hung windows is they're made to be used both upper sash and lower sash, because what it creates when you put both of those sash toward the middle is actually creates airflow when you have those two different openings. And so if you are talking to somebody about repair options and they want more versatility in the long run, repairing both often means you can have better energy efficiency and airflow within your home. And you can easily change the color of the paint. Like you can, it's an option, you can add an extra layer if it's, you know, looking a little bit frayed, kind of like these other windows that you previously saw, then you might want to, you know, it depends on if there's lead, but you can, you know, just sand off and take off any loose paint and cover that over. So there's also, so there's just kind of these little steps forward. I also want to note to people, you don't have to remove all of the glazing and all of the paint to maintain your windows. That if you saw in Laura's picture where there's little pieces of missing glazing, you can actually spot glaze. And so you're filling in those gaps in the glazing. That can be done in place depending on where your window is. And similarly with paint, if you have like a small section that's showing wear in those more traditional spots that Laura pointed out on those corners, you can just do spot finishing for your windows as well. And so it doesn't have to be a complete and laborious process. It really just depends on the need of your client or kind of what you know, the person is looking for in terms of a full restoration, a partial restoration, some functionality or full functionality, as kind of a la carte menu in my mind for window restoration. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have on this one.
All right. Thanks, Laura. I can take it over again. Yeah, a la carte is a great term, Laura, because that's where I think it's really important to be able to have your clients or even you yourself talk to a craftsman, a window restoration person, and discuss what the needs are. And they should be able to provide different options for what your clients need. So this picture here, obviously we want to try and keep windows as much as possible. In the case where a sash maybe needs to be replaced because it is severely damaged and it's just not financially worth it trying to recreate it, a lot of times you can find a replacement old sash at a salvage shop. And we have a giant one in Northeast Minneapolis that has an entire floor dedicated to window sashes. So very likely you'd be able to find a replacement one that, again, just needs a little love, probably some, you know, paint color, a little glazing touch up, and it can go, you know, just basically swap it in. A lot of times, the standard size openings in our older homes were a 24 by 24 or 26 by 26, even numbered dimensions. So it's fairly easy to be able to find something if you need to. And one of the things that we like to call this process of replacing an old sash with an old sash instead of an old sash with a new one is replacement in kind. You are keeping with the same kind of sash. On the next slide, Laura, I did a last minute swap out here on this one, but if you are listing a house, one of the things that will literally flock buyers to the house is by having restored original windows or updated windows, or, you know, some kind of reference to restoration in original windows. Because if there are buyers out there, and we know there are buyers out there that are looking for an older home, they would absolutely love to be able to know that, okay, these windows are functional. It's a stress that I don't have to worry about walking into this home to put money or time or anything like that. And really, to have something like that just creates this kind of feeling of warmth, and the house has been cared for and it's move-in ready, which that is so appealing, right? To have a move-in ready home, but yet you have this warmth of an older home. It's just a great combination to have. So the next slide, which is about replacing, and you might hear my voice drop down a little bit because I don't necessarily want to talk about replacing, but we do need to address it, of course. As I mentioned, it's not replacing a window is not just one window. For example, if, 2 of the 6 windows facing the street, which are, the most visible, you'd want to replace all of them. So that just makes the dollar amount of the project go up. It's a large investment, and being able to repair a component of a vinyl window, is very difficult, if at all possible. Really, I would say the only times a window should be replaced is really if the upkeep has been so deferred that it is just really, really bad. Really, really bad. You maybe want to look at replacement of windows, but again, I mean, there's still craftspeople that will fix the sills, they'll fix the sashes, I mean, it's a matter of finding people to be able to do it. And there are people out there that will. And then there are times when some owners just feel that that's the only way to go, and you can't convince them otherwise. So you sort of have to give up a fight. But knowing that vinyl windows, as they're advertised, are maintenance free, and we know nothing is maintenance free. Everything requires some kind of maintenance, right? Even if it's just cleaning, it still requires some kind of maintenance. But as we've learned over the last couple of decades, where vinyl windows have come up and they're calling maintenance free, we're calling them also replacement positive because that's the case. They wear out and they can't really be repaired. And so it's just this ongoing cycle of replacing the product, and that's just dollars. And then finding a repair person for a broken pane of glass in a vinyl window is almost impossible. I know of maybe one place that will maybe do it, but because it's a double pane and there's a glass, or there's a gas in between the 2 panes, a lot of places don't do it. The vinyl windows were not created to be maintained. They were created to be replaced. Okay. I think it's back over to you, Laura, unless Natalie, maybe we want to take a break.
Why don't we get started on this section, and maybe like 10:35 we take a break?
Perfect. Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so the next section that we're talking about are the reasons to save your old wood windows. And so this is just an overview of how you can talk to your clients about these windows. These are often the points that window restoration experts talk about, because there could be numerous reasons why to save your old windows, and everybody might have a slightly different way to connect with wood windows for reasons to save them. So in going through this, I've lumped some together, but a lot of these are taken from Steve Jordan's book, which is called The Window Sash Bible, which I do highly recommend. It's very, very detailed if you're really wanting to get nerdy about all of this stuff. And so with that, I'm going to give a little bit of overview and then have a couple more specific slides about each of them. But the first is about character and aesthetics, and I won't cover this too much because Laura talked about this really, really well. But windows are often seen as a character defining feature for structures, and they're really made for that house, and they're made to fit the house, the character aesthetic, but also in terms of the materiality. These materials are made to work together within the home. So in terms of aesthetics, you can see really clearly in some of those previous photos how distinct they can look. And I'm actually thinking it might be better for me to just show you some of these pictures I had too. Okay, so let me just figure out how to do this. I have my notes and I've exited out of my notes. So give me just one hot second. I'm so sorry about this. Sorry about this. I don't know how I did this. Okay, sorry about that. Um, okay, so the first one is that about that character and aesthetics component. This is just one more example of a whole building, so you can get a better sense of what curb appeal wise, how changing these windows can, affect the outside. And there's other different changes that have been made to this building, but in particular, you see that these were, 9x9s, a lot of divided panels. And, you can see some of these are these wider windows now. The structure and the fenestration, which is where the windows are placed, has been dramatically altered. One thing to really know about these smaller window panes is that some people want those big pieces of glass, but historically, the reason we have those smaller panes is that it was easier to manufacture those smaller panes, but it was also easier to replace them because they're going to be less costly over time. And so in a lot of ways, having these more 2/2 feels like it should be more historically appropriate, but overall changes the whole feel of this building. The next part I do want to talk about is the durability, sustainability, and the quality of materials, which was referenced a little bit before. This is from a very favorite cartoon graphic about wood windows that I've always found especially entertaining. And so the key about this is that the first thing I'll note is that pre-1940s windows are made of wood that's very different than contemporary wood. And so what I'm talking about is old growth wood. And what this image shows over here is that these lines, so from those, the hardwood, the softwood, so the summer growth and winter growth of this wood, these lines are much closer together. And so what this does overall is that it gives it a number of different characteristics, but that includes, oops, see if I can, nope. Anyways, but what it does is it gives it a number of different characteristics, including making it more rot resistant. It actually is more pest resistant over time. And if maintained properly, can last a very, very long time. It's often when, deterioration due to neglect, so deferred maintenance, that these old wood windows can have a lot of issues. When Laura mentioned earlier replacement in kind, why that can be so incredibly important is that if you have an old window, you maybe need to replace a part of it, you can actually salvage parts from other old growth wood to make those replacements so that those components will last just as long as the rest of the window. In terms of, I also like to mention, so it seems really low tech with this pulley and balance system. However, these are also meant to be maintained and restorable. And so because it is a simple system, it allows many people to have the capacity to fix those Sash Cords, fix that pulley system. And including that, there's the ease of repair, just as Laura mentioned before. So they're meant to be taken apart, parts replaced. So if we talk about sustainability, that these windows are already located in this home, they fit with the character of the home, and it allows for these materials to also continue doing the work that they're meant to do. I think that this might be last one before a break, if I'm correct, Natalie. But when we come back, we'll talk about the rest of them.
Great. Yeah, back at 10:39 on my watch. Thank you. Welcome back. Laura, I say take it away. We've got just over 20 minutes left and then we'll have a little discussion. Thanks.
Sounds good. So I'm going to just talk briefly about this again. Laura mentioned this before, but part of the reason why I definitely wanted to show this slide is that we talked about those, weight pockets that you can open up on the side of your windows. And so this is just a couple of images that show those pocket doors. And so this little piece down here
Laura?
actually will slot.
Laura, you're not
Yes.
showing your screen.
That would be a problem. Sorry, y'all. Just gotta,
We want to see the pockets.
How can you see it now?
Yes, thanks.
Lovely. Thank you for stopping me before I got too started.
Yeah, no problem.
So now that you can see what I'm actually pointing at. So these are the little pocket doors, and they can look a little bit different. It often depends on the craftsperson about what these will look like. But this piece down here actually will slot in here. You can tell that the cord on this one was cut, which is why it was needing to be replaced. But what these are often held in by is they're either slotted in by the way the wood is cut, and often they'll have a screw on the top or the bottom that will slot in and kind of also hold that in. And the reason I wanted to include these couple of images is to also show that throughout the whole process of doing window restoration and repair, each part of this is made to be repairable, and the tools and resources necessary don't have to be super complicated. And so some of these more base level interventions are definitely, I would say, very approachable even for anyone who hasn't necessarily taken on a repair project like this before. Sash cord replacement, as mentioned earlier, is one of those really great first steps. Glass replacement, I always like to mention. Some people, I personally feel it's easier to do glass replacement when you take the window sash out. However, you can do glass replacement in place if you need to. And there are some companies who will come in and do that. When it comes down to wood repairs, it can be a little bit more complicated. That's where you might want to talk to an expert. Perhaps you have one of your rails or your muttons, those pieces that go and divide the glass, might be an issue, but often those, because they're made to be repairable, a professional is going to have an easier time making those replacements and potentially can find ways to replace those in kind. So I do love to just tell people, and I firmly believe that anybody can learn how to do window restoration, or at least the majority of the different parts of window restoration. I did want to talk just briefly about weather stripping. And so when I often talk about people, they're like, well, they're, very drafty and I feel all this air coming in and, what can I do? And even if, they've gone through this restoration process, like I want a little bit more. And there are a lot of different methods to go along with this. But the first thing I always ask are, how are your storm windows? And this is for the fact that double hung window systems and older window systems are meant to be that. They're meant to be a system that works together. And so that storm window works with that double hung system or that old wood window system to be more energy efficient. And so some people may not focus entirely, focus their effort on those storm windows. However, they can make a huge difference with maintaining your storm windows and having ones that are a little bit better. And so along with this, after that, I also like to talk about temporary and then semi-permanent. There's also permanent types of weather stripping and weatherization options. Here it's more of what's called, I think it's the T zinc hook and flat system. I'm going to eat my words. I often mix these up. But what this does is that you actually will cut a channel into the window and it will slot into the channel. Sometimes you'll actually attach weather stripping straight to your window. And so these are a little bit more of those invasive, more permanent, semi-permanent options. However, there are other options which include, those little pieces that you can put, on the tops of your windows, just to add like a little bit more seal between there's this piece here that's called a parting bead. It's what separates the upper sash and lower sash. And to make sure that the seal between the sash and the parting bead is a little more together. And I will say some of these are more involved. It might be good if you're not feeling super comfortable to have somebody more professional come in to do some of these more intensive weatherization efforts. However, there are a lot of options, including putting plastic and otherwise over your windows if you need something a little more kind of ground level, basic way to address this. And Laura, I know you have a couple of notes on this if you also want to chime in with those.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, as a realtor, how you can sort of guide your clients on if it needs weather stripping or not. And so in a lot of cases, you'll see this sync, sort of a track system, I call it. And it helps a lot. But if the windows don't, and your clients are commenting on how it's drafty or it's noisy or it's loose or something like that, take a look at the window, stand back and see if you can see light coming through the sides. For example, there's a big gap. You could try standing there, seeing if you feel like a draft of air or, some kind of airflow coming through. And a good way to do that is just use a little lighter and kind of bring it around the sill, around the top, or if you have like a paper streamer, that's what I'm going for. Like a little paper, like a piece of paper streamer. It's very lightweight. And then again, just kind of bring it around and see if you see it flutter. That means that there's air coming through and you probably need some weather stripping. So to kind of address some potential questions going further, these are all components where, as somebody's coming to kind of assess the windows, and as you are educating your clients about pieces and areas of the windows that should maybe be repaired, these are all parts of the conversation pieces to sort of keep track of. Excuse me.
Okay, so this next slide, the graphic looks a little funny, but there is a purpose to having it. And it is talking a little bit more about the money conversation of this, and also, energy efficiency of this. And really what this is showing is the different years of payback that is going to be needed for different types of windows. And so what this is taking into consideration is what is going into a landfill, what is the thermal rating of these, and what often the gist of this is saying to us is that the energy savings you might get with a replacement window isn't going to pay back. It's not going to pay itself back before you will need to replace that window again. And so these studies have been done in a number of different places, but one of the more comprehensive ones is from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which, through their study showed that it is the most cost-effective option to restore your original wood windows, which includes having a good storm window. And that can have, just as good at energy efficiency. This can include weatherization options, but ultimately the way that salespeople will market replacement windows is really overhyping it. And so they'll say things like you'll have a 50% energy savings and you'll have more energy efficiency, which fundamentally actually isn't true, and it isn't shown by their numbers, and it's not shown by places like the National Trust, which have done exhaustive studies on this. And so even in that article that I showed you the front page to, they mention energy savings with getting replacement windows. And what that often doesn't take into consideration is, all the materials that will end up going into the landfill due to this, because fundamentally, like Laura, and I think both of us have mentioned repeatedly, is that these newer windows are not meant to be repaired. They're meant to be replaced, and it will be on a consistent timeline for as long as you own the house. Whereas, you know, a well restored original wood window and storm window can actually last for 50 years with proper maintenance. And so if we think about the quality of materials that you're getting with these original wood windows versus the others that will deteriorate more rapidly over time, that you will actually invest more money by doing replacement window as an option. And this is also a good way, I think, to discuss why replacing in kind different materials as a very good option too, because it's important to understand that you can get newly milled windows, but if they're using more contemporary wood, that will often mean they don't have the longevity as these older ones. And so it's really good to know you have those resources for replacement in kind. Yes, so I also want to make a quick note because I forgot to mention it with the weather stripping. But I also like to note that sash locks, so the part that you can lock them, people often think it's just for security, but those are actually meant to be locked and to tighten down your window. And so if you have clients, you know, who don't have those, it's a really great for us option to include because that can often help with the draftiness just right away. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. I cannot go through a window presentation without mentioning cyclic maintenance. And we've mentioned it once already, but I'm going to really reinforce this because many window companies will really boast that their windows are maintenance free. But what that really means, it's because maintenance free means it can't be maintained really. And it also means that, and so really what I like to impress upon people is that every house requires maintenance. And so we need to, you know, consider that full picture of what home ownership means. And this is something I like to talk about just in general with home ownership, is creating a plan for maintenance. You can maintain these windows over time. You won't be able to maintain those other ones. And so it's really identifying languages, the language that is used to market to homeowners and why new is considered best. I'm going to go briefly over safety hazards. I know this is where I'm going to loop back to the lead abatement prioritization question. So there are different hazards with old homes. However, we have a lot of ways that we can address these issues. We'll point out that Rethos often offers lead abatement classes, very helpful. And there's a ton of other resources for homeowners online. The one thing I will say about lead abatement prioritization, I personally, when talking to homeowners about this, ask what windows are you using most often? Because the biggest concern is when you open and close windows, it's creating lead dust. So that's where your windows are rubbing against the sides or on the other components. That's where that lead dust is created. The biggest concern too, from what my perspective is, if you have kids or kids staying in your home in particular rooms, I often will advise that those are the rooms you do first, especially if you open and close the windows frequently. But there are safe ways to go about lead abatement as an owner, but there are also professionals who will come in and can do lead abatement. Asbestos is something that you have to take into consideration. I don't know, it's not a super frequent thing, but asbestos can be in glazing of windows. You can get at-home tests for both lead and asbestos. And I also like to just, you know, when talking to your homeowner, try to feel out what their limits are and what they might be comfortable with and offer suggestions there. With that, I think we're on to common questions. I'm not sure how you want to handle this, Laura, but
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure either, but so what if they can't be repaired? I think both Laura and I have mentioned several times throughout the class, like they can be repaired. They really can. And it's just a matter of finding finding the source, whether it's the homeowner that wants to do it, or they want to hire it out to do it, or take a class and then come home and they're their own expert. They can be repaired. They truly can. Even if they're needing replacement parts, whether it's the muntins or the bottom part of the sash is rotting and it needs some major structural repair, it can still be repaired. We just talked about lead, and then local resources is both of us had mentioned that there's a handout that we're going to, I'm not sure how it's going to be delivered at the end of the class, Natalie, but the intent of this handout really is for you as realtors to be able to include it in your listing presentations, or give it to your buyers in your buyer presentations when you know that they're an old home junkie. And here are some things, here's some tools that you can look forward to. So really this handout is meant for you to be able to come across to your clients as the resident expert, at least enough to be dangerous.
And I think with that, we'll probably open it up for more questions just from you all, things that we might want to cover a little bit more in depth, or other questions that are still lingering. And I also stop sharing this so we can see each other.
I had a question. What about casement windows? I have a 1950s home, and they have Anderson windows in it. And I called somebody a long time ago and they said, well, we don't do casement, we just do double hung. So do you have any information on casement?
Well, so my first question would be, are they double pane? Do they have the sealed gas kind of compartment in them?
I believe they do. I believe they do.
Okay. So when you have something, so it depends on if the gas seal has been broken. That's when it can be really difficult. It really is pretty unusual to find people who can repair that seal. And so what I've talked to people about is, if you're looking to replace the glass, you're having issues with the seal, then what the option is to replace the glass with like a new sealed piece of glass. You know, in 1950s casement windows, sometimes it can be a little bit easier to get at that glass to do replacement. I often recommend talking to more of a professional. Sometimes I think Anderson windows will offer different historic window repairs, but it often will require full replacement of glass if the seal for that glass has been broken. In terms of wood, you know, once you get into the 1950s, you're talking about new growth wood, which means that it's just not going to be quite as durable or sustainable. However, some of the interventions talking about old wood windows can be similar. So it's making sure that you have a proper finish. I always like to stress water management. So if you're seeing rot, if you're seeing water damage, then it's considering where it's coming from so that you can work on abating that and moving that water out and away. You can do epoxy repairs on 1950s windows or any wood component in a home. And in terms of restoration, actually, there's a number of, I think, more UK aimed, I guess, articles I've read about casement windows, just in terms of hardware restoration, how to increase the functionality, what type of weather stripping might be best is a little bit different with casement windows. But I do believe, like Steve Jordan's book, I think actually addresses casement windows and how they can actually differ than double hung. But there are weatherization and other options for that. Does that help? It might be a little bit too much.
Do you know of anybody in your resource guide that does casement windows?
Michelle, I would say I don't think it's necessarily specific to a casement window versus a double hung window, but more the age and the mechanics of the window itself. So if it's a casement window that cranks open, for example, it's the crank part and the pieces of the window that are not as commonly known how to repair and replace.
Okay.
Which is maybe why you got the response that you did.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you might also check with Anderson Windows. Sometimes will sell individual components. So if it is the crank system or something otherwise, sometimes if you talk with more of their specialty department, they can sometimes find replacement parts for that, but it really depends.
I believe SP Windows does some casement rehab. I think I've seen that on their website, which is included in your resource flyer, which I know we've mentioned this a handful of times. Just you wait. After class, you're going to get an email with not just the slide deck that you saw, but also a really nice, 2-page flyer with links to some of the resources that have been mentioned, local businesses, both for window rehab and for storm windows and wood replacement windows. So if you're wanting to create something that looks historically accurate and is also repairable, there are some companies locally who are recreating wood windows that are really lovely. So again, stay tuned from that. You'll get an email follow-up after class with all of that info. So it is 11 o'clock here. So if folks have lingering questions, we can hang out for a few minutes. If you need to head out, that's a-okay. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Laura and Laura for sharing your knowledge. Real estate agents, please do sign out once again with your full name and license number, and we'll get your credit uploaded to Pulse Portal shortly.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Natalie, do I get credit for this also?
You actually do. I think there's a different form we need to fill out, but I think you do.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Great presentation.
Great. Thank you.